Play at Novibet.
Hello and a warm welcome to the Irish Angle, sponsored by Novibet. We're back again for another week, looking back at all the stuff that happened last week, and we've lots to talk about, lots of great racing as well. Emma, Johnny, my usual guests are here. Welcome to the show.
Thanks very much, Vinny.
Now, start off. A bit of sad news. I hope it gets better news soon. Is Graeme Lee, Galway man? He was involved in a very unusual incident, and he seems to be very badly injured after it from Newcastle on Friday night, where he was unseated rider coming out of stalls, and we're hearing some terrible things about the injuries he'd suffered. He's got spinal injuries as well. Johnny, he's from your neck of the woods as well. 47 years of age, and he had a great career.
Yeah, like it's deeply worrying, I suppose. Like, you know, when you hear something like this, I mean, Wesley Joyce's injury at the time, there was a bit of a kind of a vacuum of information, and it looked terrible. And hopefully we get a similar result here where the outcome is better than it looked like it would be at the time. Because, you know, if you go back to Graham I had to look up to the English Streaver, the 2005 World Hurdle. We're going on 20 years. That seems like another lifetime ago, and how he reinvented himself as a very good jockey on the flat. The problem with the flat is things just happen so fast, and like this was a real freak incident. And at Graham's age, I always say, like when I remember saying to Fran Berry as he retired relatively prematurely, it was like, Fran, you got out in one piece. You should be absolutely delighted. You had a good career. And I think for jockeys, whether they're national hunt or flat, like that is ultimately all that matters. And, you know, you've invariably families involved that want their daddy or mother back. And this just shows the danger of it. And my heart goes out to Graham's family at this time. It's a horrible situation for him to be in. He's from a perspective of Galwegians, you know, we don't have that many Galway jockeys, but we have some very good ones, the likes of himself and obviously Paddy Brennan as well, and some other good kids as well on the flat throughout the years. But Graeme is up there with the best jockeys ever produced, obviously from Galway, and you know, he's, as I just like to reiterate, like we were all thinking of him. Everyone is thinking of my WhatsApp groups. We're all on about Graeme Lee this weekend when there was a lot of racing to be talked about.
Yeah, I agree. Emma, what did you make of it? Like, it's hard to get your head around this, isn't it? You see, we watched jump racing all last weekend, where we know how seriously dangerous that is for the participants, and there's been lots of terrible accidents over the years and all sorts with it. But you can understand how, because they're running at 30, 40 miles an hour into fences and hurdles and all the rest. But the flat, you think, okay, we know they go a lot quicker, but it tends to be safer. You would think at the start of a race that, you know, just coming out of stalls or not traveling that quickly, you'd think you'd be okay. But just with horses, there seems to be a case that you're never safe. Are you on a horse? And I know you ride out every morning and everything else. Do you feel that when you're riding?
I suppose no, you wouldn't really be thinking about it, but it's just, I suppose when you see a fall on the flat, it's always maybe a little bit more worrying than over jumps. I think it's you're probably not expecting it as much as maybe a jump jockey would be coming over a fence. You're not expecting, I suppose, to fall coming out of the stalls in the flat, and I suppose it happens a lot quicker, like Johnny said. But yeah, no, it's terrible. I suppose the reports are kind of unsure of the injuries at the moment, but like Johnny said, hopefully it'll be maybe something more positive than what it sounds like at the moment. Yeah, you just be thinking of him and his family. It's very, very sad.
Yeah, absolutely. Let's hope he makes a full and speedy recovery. That's at least fingers crossed for that. Okay, we'll move on. Last week we had some serious racing, lots of big things. Down Royal meeting was rescheduled as well, and it was a Gordon Elliott feast. 13 winners over the 2 days at Down Royal, and on Friday, Saturday, 13 winners. He'd 6 one day, 5 the other in Down Royal. Pure dominance, but of course Willie Mullins didn't take part. Then we had over the whole week with all of the jump racing. Looking at it, we had 45 jump races last week. 29 of them won by Gordon Elliott, Willie Mullins, or Henry de Bromhead. So serious domination there. But obviously, look, we love our good horses. We'd Alaho back in Clonmel. Emma, you went down for that. Then we had the Grade 1, Jerry Colom and Envoy Allen and Conflated put on a cracker in the 4-runner race up and Down Royal, the first Grade 1 of the season. Just let's go through some of the big ones. Emma, Alaho first off, down in Clonmel. What did you make of it?
Look, I mean, I suppose it wasn't really much of a race. It was kind of just schooling, really. Like, he went off in front and no one really got involved at all. Look, he was very, very impressive. I think the one thing about Alaho is you're kind of watching him go past you and you say, oh, look, he's not going too hard. But then you see the horses in behind and they're absolutely flat out. Like, he's just such a big horse. And even though he doesn't look like he's under any kind of exertion at all, the horses in behind can really feel the pressure. So he went a fair gallop now, in fairness, in Clonmel. I think it was his first start in 561 days. So like he'll probably feel it a bit afterwards. Like, the ground was very, very testing, but look, no one got involved in it really. It was a pity Mouse's horse didn't win, I suppose. Janadale gave it some bit of an effort, but like he was just way, way too good. I suppose King George for him next. He's short enough though. I think about 5-1 after a race like that, after such a long time off as well. You'd be maybe a small bit worried about a bounce, but look, I'm sure they were just delighted. It was, I suppose, as good as you could expect. Really, foot perfect.
Yeah, giant of a horse, isn't he? 17.2 hands or something, according to Willie Mullins, one of the biggest he's ever had, I think. Yeah, incredible. What did you think, Johnny? Is he a horse for you for a King George?
Yeah, like he kind of a tendency to jump left, but yeah, he's a hell of an engine. Like, I've taken on Alaho bits in the past. It's kind of like what Emma was saying there. Like, you think that you think as she says that, like, he's not going too fast, and sometimes I've thought that I thought at Punchtown last year, where he sent off 6-5. Pretty sure I laid him then. I've laid him on a couple of occasions before, thinking he was too short, and like, he's on a hell of a win and run now. And like, the race itself, I mean, I don't think these races are spectacles really at all. But at the same time, Janadale's rated 161 and French Dynamite was declared. Fair play to John Ryan for a nice bit of place in McGrange Walk. But he's a hell of an engine, Alaho. But I like it. It's just these races don't do anything for me really. As much as we've a horse that of his ability, when it's such of a cakewalk, he's getting £5 off Janadale. To me, it's just a race you watch and you move on from. To be honest.
Okay, what about that? What about then up in the north then? Gordon Elliott's dominance. The first thing to note is with the first grade one of the season, you would think all the trainers would be chomping at the bit to have a runner in that. We only got 2 trainers making entries for that race. Henry de Bromhead, Gordon Elliott. We end up with four runners. Now, look, it was a hell of a race and 4 very good horses in it. And Jerry Calam could be a serious horse going forward as well. Envoy Allen, first time ever beaten in Down Royal, I think. Is that right? 4 previous runs, 4 previous wins up there. Went down on his sword by 3/4 of a length. What you make of that, Emma? It was a good race, a good renewal in the sense we got some very good horses taking part in it. But it's a bit disappointing. Is it 2 trainers making entries for a grade 1?
Yeah, look, it's definitely not ideal at all. But like, I suppose when you kind of look through the Irish Gold Cup horses, like, it's kind of hard to see who's really missing. I suppose Gallop and Deschamps and Fast or Slow, I think they're due to meet in the John Durkin in a few weeks' time, so they were never going to go there. It's not a race really, it's not a meeting, I suppose. Really seems to support the whole pile. He sent the odd horse up there, but his best horses, I suppose they probably aren't really ready. I think his horses are probably only getting rolling now at the moment. So, but like, taken, I suppose, away from the fact that there was only a couple of trainers involved in it, it was some race. Like, Jerry was very, very fancied, but like, I think you have to give all credit to Envoy Allen. Like, I think it was his first time ever being beaten in Down Royal. He was a 4-time winner there, and he gave him a fair test. It's kind of the finish. I think you'd all be waiting for. Like, when you look at a meeting like that and Gordon Elliott's winning, I don't know, what did he win, 12 or 13 races over the 2 days up there? Like, a race like that, I suppose, would kind of add the bit of life to the crowd that you need up there when a kind of a trainer might be dominating the whole way through. Seeing I suppose he was odds on, Jerry. I'm not sure what price he was, odds on favourite getting up on the line. As to his Gold Cup chances now after that, like, I was a big fan of him last year. I think he might just be a little bit too slow for a Gold Cup against the likes of a Gallop and Deschamps, though, to be honest. He probably is capable of winning a Gold Cup, but is he capable of beating Gallop and Deschamps? I wouldn't be totally convinced. I wouldn't be backing him. I think he's only about 5-1 now at the moment, which is very, very short. I think I'd probably be quicker to back Rob Cole's other horse that we talked about last week.
Okay, and what about him? Do you think Jerry Calam? What do you think in Grand National? Is that what you're thinking longer term?
What's the Grand National? I suppose he would be a Grand National horse. His jumping was he absolutely clattered a fence early on, but I suppose stepping up into open company against very, very good horses, you'd forgive him for being a little bit rusty jumping. But look, he's well capable of winning a renewal of a Gold Cup, but whether he's capable of beating the horses that are there at the moment, I wouldn't be convinced.
Very good. What do you think, Johnny? What did you make of it?
I put up Envoy Len is a horse that I kind of find hard to get right, but like Emma, I thought Jerry Colombe. I backed Jerry Colombe at Cheltenham last year, and I saw his limitations on the day when he basically was touched off in a photo, but he was beaten as a novice. Obviously, I think he's a very good horse. I think he's made for a Gold Cup. For all that, I'm not sure he's good enough to win it, because if you look at this race, there really was nothing between them. Envoy Len, I actually felt for him. I think if the race were run again, maybe he'd win it. It was just sort of the way Jerry Colombe was outpaced so early. Envoy Len got racing actually quite early to get himself into it, and maybe he got there a fraction early himself because he's such a classy horse. I thought Rachel was pretty much brilliant on him throughout, but just the race itself, what you're getting at here, Vinny, this is where Irish Jumps racing is at the moment. The four of these horses were running point to points basically to sell them. They all came from the point to point field to be sold for. I'm speculating what they were sold for, but I'm sure it was something in the region of 1.5 million or something put together, because they're all like flashy horses, all good looking horses, and so on and so forth. The point to point scene now has gone from being something of the people, really grassroots, something that got people going racing because of the local hunt and all the local people involved. It's basically now more professional than almost like, I suppose bumpers and like you run a horse in a point to point to sell him now rather than a bumper. It's easier to sell a horse that wins a point to point than a maiden hurdle. So all these four horses, it was almost certain that these horses were going to end up with big yards. So you have two trainers with runners in the first big Grade 1 of the year, and one of them, Willie Mullins, isn't even interested in this particular card because of its timing. So I'm being a bit of a traditionalist here, but I'd prefer to have more trainers with national owned horses, because the whole point of national owned racing was that you fall upon a horse, you buy him as a store, you breed him yourself, you take your time, and it turns out like beef or salmon that he's no pedigree, but he happens to be good and completely unfashioned connections. But that's kind of completely gone from the game now. And even you look at the Gordon's absolute dominance in the national in Limerick, where he'd 2/3 of the field. I don't think it's great for racing, to be honest. I'm not so much blaming owners for sending the horses to a particular trainer because they want what's best and they're paying a lot of money, and they're going to lose money by and large on these horses. But the point to point scene now is such a sales ring, and everything is about selling the horse for the biggest price. There's such a small amount of people who are actually going to pay that price, and then they're going to send it to literally a handful, 2 or 3 trainers maybe. So I think why we have a situation where we 4 runners, brilliant race, but 4 runners in this race, and Willie Mullins not even represented, goes back to where point-to-point racing has become for me.
Then half an hour later, we have a Grade 2, wasn't it? 2 runners we ended up with there. But so like it's a difficult situation. Just looking at the fact that, saying, I wrote in my blog this week, we'd 45 national hunt races in the last week, and 29 of them were won by 3 trainers: Gordon Elliott, Willie Mullins, Henry de Bromhead. You look as well, Gowran Park Saturday, we had 3 2-mile maiden hurdles. Now, admittedly, it was on very testing heavy ground, okay, but they were all won by Henry de Bromhead, Gordon Elliott, and Willie Mullins, the 3 maiden hurdles. There were horses there beaten 3 green fields. They were miles and miles back, and 22 of them were completely tailed off. There were others couldn't even finish their races; they were that far back. So you just wonder what's going to happen. All those other little yards with little horses, how do they compete? They have to go handicapping, obviously, but there's a problem for them. How do they even get handicapped when they're beaten that far? They're going to have to finish, as Emma was telling me beforehand, that you've got to finish within 30 lengths in one of your 3 qualifying runs to be able to get a handicap mark. These horses are never going to get within 30 lengths of any Willie Mullins or Gordon Elliott or Henry de Bromhead horse in these maiden hurdles. So it's even hard to see how they're going to get themselves handicapped, that being the case. And then I look at tomorrow, there's an ordinary meeting on an air. 14 Irish trained horses heading over there. None of them are Gordon Elliott, Willie Mullins or Henry de Bromhead. They're all the smaller yards, trying to get a win out of a horse, presumably, or getting to run well in minor races. Is that the future, Emma? Are we going to end up seeing all these smaller Irish trainers with their small horses trying to send them off to England to try and get a win or get placed or whatever, because they can't even get qualified for handicaps if they stay in Ireland at this rate?
Yeah, look, it's just picking up on Johnny's point of the point points yesterday. Like, I was actually in Drummahan yesterday, and Gordon actually won the 4-year-old Geldings Maiden, so you can't even get away from him in Drummahan point to point. I don't know, I added to his massive tally over the week, but like, it's a very, very good point. Like, I think maybe 10, 15 years ago, you could send a horse to the point to points and they might be 3/4 fit and they'd run a very nice race on soft ground. But now, like, you're going there and you're coming up against horses who are really, really ready for the runs. And like Johnny is saying, it kind of feeds into they're going to become expensive horses at the sales, and they'll end up with Gordon, Willie, or Henry, or Gavin Cromwell. And then you've the likes of a smaller trainer, who maybe might run a horse in a point to point, it'll pull up and they can't sell it because it wasn't fit enough running out the first time. But like even looking at Clonmel on Thursday, like I think it was Gordon, Willie, and Gavin Cromwell won all the races. Edward O'Grady then won, I think, the second maiden hurdle, and you're thinking that's a win for one of the small guys. But like Edward O'Grady's a multiple Grade 1 winning trainer. Like he's not one of the small guys at all. It's just the way it's gone at the moment. It's kind of hard to wrap your head around it. And like I didn't actually cop onto air now until we were talking off air a while ago. Like looking through the entries there, I mean, it's not a big day's racing. The prize money is tiny compared to what you see here. Like it's obviously just trainers trying to go over and keep owners happy, maybe give a horse a much better chance of winning a race. Don't think the English trainers will be too happy about it now that the Irish trainers are being pushed over across the sea to try and take their prizes. But yeah, it's kind of hard to wrap your head around it really. Like all these trainers going over to Ayr on a Wednesday. You'd say something if they were going to the Cheltenham Open meeting now, trying to land handicap over there, but yeah, it's definitely worrying. It's like Johnny was saying, it's not like you can't blame the owners. Like the owners can send the horses to anyone they want to send it to, but it's not very good for the future of Irish racing, I wouldn't say.
You'll probably talk. We're going to talk about the Yuften case, Vinny. But to be honest, like national hunt racing probably does need some sort of almost like some new regulation that like you can. I think one trainer may have brought this up before, and I'm not blaming. Like I get on really well with these trainers, and I think they're perfectly entitled to do what they do. But like the national hunt game at the moment, I spoke to a trainer recently who'd gone from 100% flat nearly to 60-40, 100% national hunt nearly to 60-40, because that's just the way it is. And I think if you're on about like restricting the amount of runners that one trainer can have in a race or something like that to make it more competitive, because the problem is, and Emma spoke about going to Clonmel, and I have been mentioning this because I've been racing more often due to work. I kind of got out of the habit of going racing. I don't enjoy going racing as much at all because the atmosphere has gone out of it. And part of the reason the atmosphere has gone out of it because the small person, we love an underdog in Ireland. The small person just isn't winning anything anymore at the top level. It's almost impossible for it to happen. And the atmosphere when you've like I'm sure when Alaho came in on Clonmel, I'm sure people weren't jumping off the rafters. It is what it is.
No, I actually posted a video of Alaho crossing the line. I don't even think there was a clap, to be honest. I mean, look, I think everyone went to go see Alaho, but it wasn't much of a spectacle. It was like a schooling race, really. All it was.
Well, like I was beside two kids, like nephews of a friend of mine, at the cup final yesterday. If you brought them to the cup final yesterday, and this is League of Ireland level, so which is like a moderate enough level of football in the global scheme of things versus Irish Shumps racing, which is the best in the world, and then you brought the two kids to go watch the horses with no life in the place for 4 hours, what would they prefer?
Right, there's no doubt, is there? Yeah, you need atmosphere. Absolutely, you need atmosphere. But like I suppose, like we talk about the trainers and there's the dominance and the concentration among a small few yards. But we've seen the same over the last 20 years with shopping, with basically grocery shopping. Look at the way it's gone. There used to be little local street corner shops selling all the stuff and everything else. Now it's gone to the big multinationals, and that's just the way of it, isn't it? It's going to be the same here. I don't think there's any way back from that. It's just the thing that gets to me, as you mentioned about the point to points, that it ends up, there was a time when anyone could end up having a good national hunt horse because they had it in the field or the farm at home, whatever. But now it's all different, because if they're anyway good, they have an idea they're anyway good, they send them to the point to point and they sell them at that early stage. That seems to be the way it's gone. Whereas before they would have run in a bumper, maybe a maiden hurdle or two, before they realized that they were quite good and they'd won their 2 or 3 races. And at that stage, I think the people had a connection to them and they stayed with them, whether they were the Nollies of the world and those sort of horses from years ago. But it just seems a case that they're all getting, it's the big owners is the problem, isn't it? To some extent, more so than even the trainers necessarily. Like, you know, obviously any owner of a horse wants their horse with the best possible trainer, whoever they may consider that to be. But when you're dealing with these owners that are paying telephone numbers for horses at a very early stage in their career, and it doesn't seem to matter to them, they could. I heard Willie Mullins talking there recently about horses he'd bought from France or something, and he was saying whatever horse it was, or a point to point, I can't remember which, but he was on about the fact that He'd got the second. They tried to buy the winner, but Nicky Henderson got the winner for one of his owners, and he got the second. And two serious horses. But you see JP McManus, he's willing to buy any amount of them, and the same with lots of others as well. They're willing to buy nearly every horse in a point to point. Just sure, spend 200 or 300 grand on them all. Let's see. We don't really care if 9 out of the 10 are useless once we get one good one that can bring us to Cheltenham and get us a winner in Cheltenham, because they seem to have an endless supply of money. So the ordinary fella has no chance, have they? Or the syndicates or the racing clubs or any of these things. They can't compete. It's all about you go to Dundalk twice last week, was it Wednesday, Friday, or whatever? Yes, there's lots of syndicates winning there, lots of racing clubs can win there, but they're not going to win at these big meetings like your Down Royals or your Nace yesterday or whatever. It's all those big owners with the multi-million-pound pots that they can afford to spend. So I don't know how we really turn that around. What do you think, Emma? Is there a place for the small owner in National Hunt racing anymore? Or are they gone out of it?
You'd like to think there was, I suppose. I know there was a bit of an initiative to run the races for trainers with less than 20 winners, but I mean, like, you think about, I think there was a few of them and they were kind of low grade handicaps, but like, who are you really excluding from those races when I think it's, if you train less than 20 winners, I'd say there might be definitely maybe 6 or 7 trainers in the country who trained more than 20 winners last year. And like, will most of them have low grade handicappers? Willie won't have any anyway. Gordon probably has a few to keep syndicates happy and stuff like that. But I mean, like, it's tough. Like you were saying there about, you've got these big money kind of store horses being bought and sent point to pointing, and you're coming up against them. Then, like, you might have a nice horse. Maybe might be rated in the 120s or something on the track, let's just say, but you're coming up against a horse who like has Gold Cup dreams or something then in Drummahan on a Sunday, and you just have absolutely no chance. Like, it's worrying, and I think it's off-putting as well for the small owner, because not everyone can afford the fees that you'd be paying to Willie or Gordon and stuff like that, and that's fine. But like, if they don't think they have any chance of having a winner on track, then it's a bit disheartening. And you're trying to maybe get a horse then for a handicap, but that takes time and it costs money. So yeah, I mean, like, let's say if I bought a horse now and I had a limited budget, and you're probably thinking of 3 runs and a handicap, you probably don't have much chance. Like, look at the maiden hurdles over the weekend. I mean, the horses that won those, I was trying to pick a horse to follow for the weekend, and sure, like, you could mention 5 or 6 of them as horses who have a real chance in Cheltenham. And if you had a horse there, a cheap boy who was half decent horse, like, you've absolutely no chance of getting anywhere near these horses in a maiden hurdle, and it's going to cost you money then to keep them going, get their handicap marked. Like you said, you have to get close enough to even get handicapped, because the handicapper can't make a conclusion, after like being tailed off by 60 lengths or something. So it's very, very hard for small owners and small trainers, and it's don't want to sound too bleak about it now, but it's tough, definitely.
Yeah, just see, last thing on it, I just see the Troytown Handicap Chase, one of the traditional big races at this time of the season, up in Navan this Sunday. 39 entries. Gordon has 17 of them. Willie is a host of them, so is Henry de Bromhead. But I think 8 of the top 9 in the handicap are trained by either Gordon or Willie. Just there's proper dominance, even in those sort of handicaps where you think maybe the handicaps you have a chance that someone else can get involved, but realistically they have the whole game sewn up at this stage. Anyway, Johnny, talking about games sewn up and different things, what about the Yuften case? It's sewn up at this stage, it's all over. Game over, ball burst. What did you make of it?
Well, I think Alan Sweetman put it well in the Racing Post, where he said it took them a long time to get nowhere. But they probably didn't get nowhere, Vinny. Like, it was like getting lost on the road and kind of almost ending up back where you started, but like really pissed off about life and having pissed off people along the way as well. I just like to say I've some sympathy for the IHRB here, because you have such a complex case to look into. For me, the optics of this case on the day, I think this race was run during COVID, was it? I think it was like at a pivotal time.
Before, yeah.
I remember the timing of it.
Before the first lockdown, yeah.
Day before
last
the lockdown.
Race meeting in Ireland or England before the first lockdown.
Yeah, and I remember thinking, like, this is one of the most nondescript races, like one of these claimers that you look at, you forget about, you move on. I thought the optics of it were terrible, to be honest, and I think the IHRB, in fairness to the IHRB, it was looking into it straight away. What happened in the last couple of weeks was utterly extraordinary. I can't get you spoke about not being able to really get much information on it. It's been the same for me, even asking around racing what actually went on here. I haven't been able to get any response.
Can I stop you there for a sec, Johnny? Just one thing, right? You said one thing there and it just pricked my ears up. You said a complex case. Why is it complex? Surely is it not the most straightforward case you can possibly have here, in the sense that there was a horse ran in Dundalk and the IHRB felt the horse didn't try, right? And the betting trends suggest they were right. The horse drifted hugely, Yuften, in the betting, and it was won by a stablemate. But that to me is even somewhat irrelevant, because if you look at the race, I wrote about this last week. If you looked at the race, there were only two possible winners of the race on official ratings. It was Yuften, even taking into account the other horse's claim, Tony the Gent. Yuften was £10 clear. He should have won the race. He should be a short price favourite for the race. The bookmakers felt that. They made him a 2 to 5 chance. And he drifts out to odds against, and money comes or whatever, or in opposition to him. The only other logical winner of the race was his stablemate, Tony the Gent, on rating. So he was the obvious one people latched onto. If you feel at the stage coming close to the off saying, hang on, there's a smell off this race here. Yuften is drifting like a barge. There must be something wrong. He can't win. What the hell is going on? Well, there's only one other winner of the race, is Tony the Gent on rating. So people backed him, or the same people backed him, or whatever, that had laid Yuften or whatever. Anyway, come back to it. It's not complex. This is ABC stuff, is it not? In trying to find, if you're policing a sport like horse racing, this is ABC. One horse runs, doesn't run in his merits. Surely that's all it is. Like, there shouldn't be a whole load of other people brought into this. Like, where do we get to here? It should be simple to me anyway. What do you think? Why do you think it's complex?
Okay, well, if you look at for example, the Racing Post ratings of the performances of Yuften going into that race, if you include the race behind Tony the Gent, he ran to a rating of 63 to 67 3 times out of 4, including the day that he disappointed, and he was lame after the race, and he missed the break, and all of these things literally happens every day of the week without kind of questionable sort of betting patterns. So if the reason I say, to me, the complexity of the case lies in the way racing is run, and trying to prove that there was something wrong going on here, because if you look at the comments, slowly away, and he was pushed along, and then he's found to be lame post race. So that's basically a get out straight away, in the sense of a horse not running to his form. And this happens every day of the week. I mean, there was a case recently where a big gamble on what was it, a 4-runner race, that to me was just like, how could you even back horses after looking at this? I'm not going to mention the race because we have to be careful what we say here. But in this instance, the IHRB are like, okay, it was the betting patterns that suggested. How could people be so confident? How in the name of God could you back Tony the Gent into odds on a race like this unless you knew something? But when they looked into it, they clearly couldn't find any evidence. So, and I'm not blaming them for that, because maybe I couldn't find any evidence of this. I don't know I don't know where these bets were put on, who put them on, what jurisdiction they were put on in what means they were put on. They certainly weren't put on course, which was the old way of doing it. They were put on online. They might have been lost online in the dark web. I've no idea what happened here. To me, the circumstantial evidence is overwhelming here, but that doesn't prove anything, unfortunately.
Yeah, but as you say, look, maybe you're right. Maybe there is a complexity to all of this betting, and we had this before when you go back to the Charles Burns case from down in Tremor, where the horse was nobbled, that they said it was going across people in faraway jurisdictions out in the Far East or something, were betting through intermediaries, through Betfair and all sorts of different things. That it does seem to be there's veils and cloaks and all this put over who's actually placing the bets and everything else. So is it a case then that we're in a sport where you can never actually find who did anything? That there's no way you can ever get down to the nitty gritty of who benefited from Yuften running below form on that day, or Tony the Gent winning, or whatever? Is that the way we're looking at, Emma? Do you think, are we in a situation here where we're never going to get to the bottom of any of these when it comes to the gambles, or horses being stopped, or whatever was going on that day, or people being aware of the fact that that Yuften wasn't going to perform to his ability?
They got to the bottom of Rhoda McNally pretty quickly, so I'd imagine they probably can. But
Yeah,
look, I think the whole thing around this is just the transparency. Like, I think it was mentioned a few times in the IHRB release, when they said they weren't going to give evidence to the referrals committee, and they mentioned for transparency, and there was just absolutely no transparency given to the public about anything really. I think there was mention of medical reports, but that was never given to the press or the public what medical evidence was arisen. Like Johnny mentioned, like there's obviously there mustn't be anything to tie to gambling either. But I think, I just think that what has been released to the public and to the press just has been not satisfactory. Like for a professional sport, I think they need to give more information as to why they're actually dropping the case. And there mustn't have been much of a case there. You'd imagine like if there was hard evidence, they would have just pressed on with it. And like that's fine, but you have to let people know what this veterinary evidence was that came forward, and just leave that, put it to bed. Then I don't think you can just kind of pushed under the carpet and pretend it never happened, which is what it feels like is happening now.
Well, Emma, you talk about the veterinary evidence. What I find difficult here is, considering we're talking about gambling, and it was about people who had inside information potentially on the situation with Yuften. We know the horse was lame post-race, so whatever this veterinary evidence is that basically scuppered the case, you presume that is telling us that Yuften had a problem long beforehand, which is why the jockey and the trainer involved presumably hadn't stopped the horse or anything. There was an issue with the horse. But if someone was aware of that, because that information is still not in the public domain now, if someone was aware of that beforehand, that would have given them a huge advantage placing a bet or laying the Yuften or whatever it is they reckon happened. So you would think that part of the case would have stood up, wouldn't you?
Yeah, that's a fair point, I suppose. But it's kind of trying to prove who knew what and what. Like, I mean, suppose we don't know what the evidence was. I suppose when you kind of tie together the veterinary evidence and the betting patterns, it makes a very messy picture. But it's I was very surprised by the original press release a couple of weeks ago by the IHRB saying they weren't going to go ahead with it. I think we're just kind of waiting so long for it, and then kind of come out with nothing was very, very surprising. But their investigations must have just completely fallen through. Like they must have had very little to actually go on. So yeah, it's kind of more questions than answers is kind of the only thing that I would say about it.
Seems to be the usual, doesn't it? We're always left with more questions than answers. We're still trying to find out about their matter of grave concern that popped up, whatever it is, 5 months ago, and now they've Mazars looking into their financial records from 2022. I'm still waiting on that. I thought that'd be finished by now. I thought that'd be an open and shut case, that if their CEO was able to spot something on the day they were going into an Oireachtas hearing 5 months ago, you'd think that a team of people from Mazars would be able to get to the bottom of that pretty quickly. I don't know. Look, will we ever find out?
It's been a damaging time for the IHRB, Vinny, between those two cases, and just the Yuften thing as well. I mean, the conclusion was pretty much ignominious on the part of the regulator, in the sense that you've all this wait, and then you've Dennis Hogan coming back and saying that the IHRB had a self-serving press release, but the sort of opaque nature of everything for me is what's concerning. Just two other things I'd like to say. If I showed anyone that race, and it was maybe his first time to look at a race and he hadn't gambled before, and I showed it to him, I'd say, you'll never have a bet on a horse if this is the way the game is run, because it was a horrible look for racing. The other thing I would say is it doesn't shine well on the media, of which I'm part, and you can probably relate to this as well, Vinny, that really the people involved in this, who are listed as being the people involved in this, probably haven't been asked enough questions. I know Paul Kimmy says there's an omerta in racing when he does his pieces on alleged drugs offences in racing or whatever else. He says, the journalists, he says we don't work hard enough. And in cases like this, the media, of which I'm part, did not work hard enough. I have to go racing. I'm already struggling to talk to some people at the races for very, very minor things, extremely minor things. And people in racing can be very sensitive. Some of them might have been my fault, some of them not. But in a case like this, it goes to show that the media in racing isn't strong enough and stuff like this either, because I haven't seen proper interviews with the people involved.
You're right, 100%. Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. The media is a huge problem in the sport generally. Look, and it's I don't know where it stems from, but I can remember you mentioned there earlier about Alan Sweeten, who's a very good journalist working for the Racing Post for many years. I remember a long time ago, he tipped a horse in the Racing Post for a race in the Curragh on a weekend, trained by Christy Roach, and Christy Roach went mad over him tipping it. Not happy. He had a row with him at the races because he didn't tip his horse that they were hoping to land a bit of a gamble on, and this sort of thing. So it shows the level you're at. It doesn't matter what you do, you're getting hit from every angle. I know all about it from the blogs I write. Jesus, don't get me started. The amount of calls and messages I get from people. So, look, some are very nice and some are very helpful, telling me different things and all bits and pieces and everything else. But there's a huge amount of people within the sport who work within the industry, and they hate to see anything negative written about it. And a lot of them, as you can see, they sing from the same hymn sheet when it comes to whatever it is, whether it's issues around Gordon Elliott sitting on a dead horse, or whatever the latest issue is, or scandal within racing, or as it is at the moment in the UK with these affordability checks. The same people all come rallying round with singing the praises of the sport and trying to get everything right again. Look, great and fair dues to them, but that's not my thing. I just like to be able to see a sport run properly is what I'm looking for, and to be able to have a bet with confidence. That's all I really want in this whole thing. And unfortunately, I can't really do that. And the same for everyone else when you've got all of this crap going on, and it is crap, and it just keeps coming. That's the issue, isn't it? And,
I could have laid Tony the gin for $2 or $3 grand that day, just for argument's sake. If I did, I've Vinny, I've had I would have down the years, I'd have laid horses heavily, not on information, but just on the basis of a price on Betfair or Betdaq or whatever it is. And if I laid the winner of this race, how would I feel afterwards? And the people who were involved heavily in this gamble, and they clearly were people involved. For me, if they're found out, they should be completely warned off for life, because this just does not add up. There was no way in the world of God you could have backed the winner of this race at those odds unless you knew something that was basically putting everyone else in the race who didn't know something completely out of kilter. And it's unsatisfactory, because there were people who benefited from this race who basically should never be involved in racing again, and we don't know, and we never will know, it seems, who they were.
Yeah, well, there you go. That's the problem with it. Anyway, we'll move on. We're not going to solve it here, so let's move on, and we'll finish up with two things I want to say. First one is, we need a horse to follow. That's our first one. A horse to follow for each of us. Emma, you must have a good one.
Yeah, look, I was kind of saying all the maiden hurdles, you could give all the winners of that as, horses who could go on and win in Cheltenham and that. But I said I'd try and pick one who maybe didn't win. So I'll go with Gorgeous Tom for Henry de Bromhead. He ran behind Slade Steele from Henry in Naas yesterday in the 2 mile maiden hurdle. I just thought it was kind of an eye-catching one. Horse, he came from the point-to-point field. I think it was his first start for Henry, and just a proper stayer. This fella, I'd say, running over 2 miles wouldn't have suited him at all. But he just stayed on really, really strongly. Kind of from the second last hurdle, made up an awful lot of ground to finish fourth. So I'd say if he steps up in trip, he should be a lot better, I'd say.
Very good. And Johnny?
I'm going to give Untubber, who is probably, I'm just looking at him here, he was bought by Mags O'Toole in August 2020, and he won his point-to-point in 2022, and obviously hadn't been seen then he's actually 6 now, going on 7, but he won his point-to-point by 20 lengths when he was trained by Dennis Murphy. And this is a typical example, bought by Rob Core, probably for massive money, and this is a typical example of where National Hunt Racing is. He was sent off 8-13 at Fairyhouse. All told, I was on to Andy Holding about this, who does speed figures. Apparently they went very, very slow on the figures, and he still won by 4.5 lengths over 2 miles. I'd say he's a serious engine, this horse, if you're looking for something for kind of the Albert Bartlett. Very well bred as well. And Untubber, who won at Fairyhouse last week, could be mine.
Okay, I'm going to go with one of the more obvious ones as well, from that Emma was on about that she didn't decide to pick. Il Atlantique, Willie Mullins, owned by Tony Bloom, the man who owns Brighton Football Club, big punter. This was most impressive. 19-length winner of a maiden hurdle. Never in doubt from the flag fall, basically. Well supported too. This is the horse, first time out in a bumper last year. He'd come from France. He'd been placed over hurdles in France. And then they ran him in a bumper where he beat subsequent Grade 1 winner, Ferran Illy, in a bumper at Leopardstown at Christmas. Then he was beaten after that by Firefox, which he was beaten 3/4 of a length by him in a bumper. And Firefox went on to win Up and Down Royal on Friday, one at Gordon Elliott, 6 winners on the day. So I think Il Atlantique, where it goes, I don't know. What trip it wants, I don't know, but it will win plenty of races. And then the other last thing I just wanted to mention here is, if you're watching this show, maybe you should make sure to watch Friday's Form Scan show with Emma. Very good the first couple of weeks of it. There's been lots of winners tipped, and I think there'll be more this weekend, because you've got a good guy on, Johnny Deneen, a man who knows a bit about placing bets on horses. So Johnny Deneen will be the guest on Friday. That should be good fun. Look, thanks for watching, and hopefully you'll keep in touch. Gamble responsibly if you are having a bet, and watch out for the rest of our shows. So do subscribe to the channel and you get notifications when we videos up and running. Thanks for watching. Bye for now.